The rain lashed against the glass-paneled walls of the coastal funeral chapel, tucked along a cliff in Carmel by the sea. I stood near the back, my hands folded loosely, watching as my family gathered near the polished pine casket. The chapel had been Dad's idea. Modern, sleek, overpriced. Mom would have preferred something smaller, maybe a garden ceremony with wildflowers and sunlight, but appearances mattered to the Langfords. I wore a simple black dress, minimalist in silhouette, unembellished, falling just below the knee. The soft silk hugged my frame gently, tailored with intention. But to my relatives, draped in glitzy morning wear and heirloom pearls, it looked plain, even cheap. "Delilah," my sister Bianca sneered as she approached, flicking a stray blonde curl over her shoulder. Her heels clicked against the marble. "Is that really what you decided to wear? You look like you're headed to a PTA meeting, not Mom's funeral." She wore a structured Givenchy coat dress, belted at the waist, her wrists heavy with Cartier. I recognized the outfit from last season's Paris show. Bianca sniffed, glancing me up and down. "I mean, I get it. Not everyone has the budget for couture, but Aunt Elise said she could have lent you something. You didn't have to look sad and broke." I said nothing, just ran my fingers along the seam of my dress, the one I'd designed myself, just last spring. The fabric was custom-dyed silk charmeuse, loomed in Kyoto. The cut was exact, the stitching silent. The piece had sold out in under 5 hours when we launched it under the Murray/Ren label. But Bianca didn't know that. She didn't know I was Ren. "You're right," I said softly. "I could have made more of an effort." Her smug smile returned as she turned away, walking back toward the front pew. Dad stood beside the casket, face stiff, eyes scanning the room as if looking for clients. His real estate portfolio had been in quiet collapse since late 2023, but the Rolex still gleamed. My brother Nathan leaned toward his fiancée, whispering about the estate division like it was a game of Monopoly. "Poor Delilah," the fiancé murmured, just loud enough for me to hear. I almost laughed. They still had no idea who owned the chapel. "Still working at that little boutique in the village," Bianca's fiancé Tessa said in a syrupy tone as she spooned quinoa salad onto her plate. "Maybe now that Eleanor's gone, she'll finally get serious about her life." Tessa had never worked a day in hers, floating effortlessly through yoga retreats, curated brunches, and charity boards, where she posed for photos with CEOs she barely understood. Her lifestyle was funded by Bianca's corporate credit card and a dwindling trust fund from her late grandfather's vineyard. I didn't respond. I rarely did. Let them believe what made them comfortable. For the past 5 years, I'd kept the illusion alive. The struggling youngest daughter, scraping by at a quiet boutique along Ocean Avenue, living in a modest studio near the wharf, driving an old Prius with faded paint and a cracked bumper. In reality, the apartment was a high-tech penthouse tucked into the cliffs above Big Sur, purchased discreetly through a holding company. The boutique was a front, an anchor, for Ren Atelier's private client base, and a design studio where my team developed pieces for high-end clients across New York, Paris, and Tokyo. The Prius? Perfect camouflage. They believed they had outpaced me. They hadn't noticed I'd lapped them. The funeral service dragged on with sanitized memories and saccharine platitudes. "She was elegant," Dad said stiffly, though I remembered the woman who used to sneak me to art museums and mend my first designs at the kitchen table after long shifts at the diner. She'd been exhausted long before cancer, worn down by my father's ambition and my siblings' entitlement. In her final months, when insurance failed her, I quietly transferred funds through a foundation I'd formed for medical equity. No one ever asked where the hospice bills disappeared to. At the wake, aunts and uncles came with soft smiles and shallow offers. "Delilah, sweetheart," Aunt Elise cooed, brushing my arm. "How are you holding up? It must be harder when you don't have much of a support system." Uncle Ron gave me a warm, pitying look. "If you want something steadier, I know someone who manages a Nordstrom branch in Monterey." Each comment landed like a well-aimed dart, misguided, sincere, and oblivious. To them, success had one shape. I'd built something else entirely. Back at Dad's aging estate, cracks in the plaster whispered the truth. The money was gone. I ladled soup in the kitchen while Bianca sparkled in the living room, boasting about her recent campaign with Lumiere, a mid-tier luxury brand I'd quietly acquired 6 months earlier through Marais/Wren Holdings. The photographer said I had the perfect look for their new campaign, Bianca declared, her voice pitched just loud enough to carry from the living room into the kitchen. Very natural, very authentic. They're doing a huge ad push next month, and I'm the face of it. She didn't mention the modest scope of the campaign, or that Lumiere had been quietly downsizing to stay afloat in a saturated market. Her 1-year contract was worth $200,000, 0 cents. Respectable, sure, but not the windfall she made it sound like. Still, to the family, it was another feather in Bianca's golden cap. "Did you see what Delilah wore today?" she added, with a laugh that pricked the air. "I know she's going through a tough time, but come on. There's a line between minimalist and pitiful." A few relatives chuckled. Aunt Elise tisked softly. "She needs direction. Maybe now she'll stop pretending that drawing dresses is a career." I kept arranging the charcuterie platters with a calm, practiced hand. Each item had been flown in from the best sources: Iberico ham, Sicilian olives, aged cheeses from Burgundy. The catering invoice, over $18,000, 0 cents, had been covered quietly by my private office, billed to a charitable hospitality arm under my holding company. Let them whisper. I had other plans. The next morning, I stepped out of the private elevator into my real office, not the boutique workspace on Ocean Avenue, but my executive suite on the 42nd floor of the Meridian Tower, overlooking downtown San Francisco. The space was serene, wrapped in glass and sunlight, framed by bespoke walnut furniture designed for French aristocracy. Sophia, my assistant, entered with coffee in hand. "Termination documents are prepared, Miss Langford," she said, placing the monogrammed leather folder before me. "Bianca Langford, Lumiere contract, effective immediately." Sophia had dual degrees from Oxford and Wharton and spoke 4 languages. I trusted her implicitly. I skimmed the contract. Bianca's modeling days with Lumiere were finished. She didn't know the brand she'd clung to was one of 17 labels under Apex Moda Group, my company. "Also," Sophia added smoothly, "our internal audit reports are ready. Your father's firm is months behind on rent. Eviction is pending. Nathan's bank is facing a federal probe, something about falsified mortgage applications, and Bianca's been maxing out her cards to keep up appearances." I nodded once. None of it surprised me. If you've been holding your breath for what happens when Bianca finds out the truth, don't miss what's coming next. Tap subscribe so you're the first to see how the Langford legacy really unravels. While they'd whispered about my lack of direction, I'd quietly tracked the unraveling of their carefully curated lives. Dad's boutique consulting firm had been hemorrhaging clients for 2 years, clinging to outdated strategies while the market shifted beneath his feet. He lost 3 major accounts to younger, agile firms willing to embrace technology. Nathan, my brother, had been playing fast and loose with approvals at his regional bank branch. Approving loans for friends and distant cousins with questionable credit history had finally caught up to him. A federal investigation was underway. Fraud was on the table. And Bianca, well, Bianca had been living off borrowed shine. She funneled every cent of her modeling checks into rent, designer outfits, and curated brunches, hoping her Lumiere campaign would be her golden ticket. She owed $58,400, 0 cents across 8 credit cards. My phone buzzed. "Bianca, just arrived at the studio. This Lumiere shoot is going to change everything. Maybe now I can help you land a real job. Love you, sis." I smiled faintly and set the phone aside. In 3 hours, she'd find out the contract was gone. Quietly, strategically dissolved. And in this industry, whispers were louder than facts. One rumor of a contract pulled for creative differences was enough to stall a career for good. But this wasn't revenge, it was revelation. At 2:47 p.m. the storm began. Bianca called, frantic, disbelieving, then Dad demanding answers, then Nathan accusing me of tipping off federal investigators. I let every call roll to voicemail. Listening to their panic revealed more than years of shallow family dinners ever had. I didn't owe them explanations. Instead, I drove toward the place where it all began. Mom's old boutique, tucked between an artisanal coffee shop and a modern gallery in the heart of San Francisco's Mission District. Still open, still humble. They thought I was just helping out, a kind daughter with no ambition. What they didn't know was that I owned the building, the cafe, the gallery, the block. Every square foot held in quiet layers of shell companies. I stepped inside, the soft scent of linen and cedar greeting me like an old friend. This was where I learned what women really wanted, what luxury meant beyond logos, how to build something real. The phone rang again. Delilah, please, I just need to talk to someone. Something awful happened, Bianca said, her voice thin and ragged over the line. Lumiere just terminated my contract. Out of nowhere, no warning. They said it was due to creative differences. Whatever that means. I don't understand. I didn't do anything wrong. This was likely the first time in her life that charm and cheekbones hadn't been enough to rescue her. Her voice trembled under the weight of unfamiliar rejection. I'm sorry to hear that, I said gently. These things happen in the industry. It's unpredictable. But Delilah, I need this job. I have payments due, rent, credit cards, car lease. Could you maybe ask around? A pause. You work in fashion, right? Maybe someone at your little boutique knows someone? My little boutique? The one she always rolled her eyes at? The one she thought paid me in tips and gratitude? She had no idea the woman she was begging now owned Apex Moda Group, which included Lumiere Fashion House, Meridian Designs, and manufacturing operations spanning 12 countries. I'll see what I can do, I said calmly. Thank you, and Delilah. I'm sorry for what I said at the funeral. I was upset and I took it out on you. It wasn't fair. There was a flicker of sincerity in her voice, the sister I remembered before success divided us. But I knew it was need, not remorse, that softened her tone. Later that evening, my phone rang again. Delilah, Dad said, clearing his throat. We need to talk. There are complications with the firm, some temporary cash flow issues. If you could maybe lend us $20,000, 0 cents, just until things stabilize. I know you probably don't have much saved, but if you could get a small loan. I glanced down at the silk blouse I was wearing, custom, hand-stitched, cost me more than that. The same blouse Dad's girlfriend had called quaint at the funeral. I'm sorry, Dad, I don't think I can manage that right now. Right, of course. We'll figure something out, he muttered. The defeat in his voice stung more than I expected. He'd always needed to be the provider. By morning, the storm grew louder. Nathan needed legal help. Bianca had been dropped by her agency. Eviction was looming. Dad's firm was circling bankruptcy. I decided it was time. I've booked a conference room at the Meridian Tower, I texted the family. We need to talk, face to face. The Meridian, Dad replied. Isn't that one of the city's most expensive offices? I know someone who got us a discount, I wrote back. On Saturday, they gathered confused, uneasy, in Conference Room A on the 42nd floor. Mahogany table, panoramic skyline, chrome accents leather chairs that whispered money. They didn't belong here, but I did. Bianca had dressed down, trading her designer statement pieces for jeans and a neutral knit sweater. Still cashmere, but subdued. Dad and Nathan came in tailored suits, the kind meant to signal stability, even as their foundations cracked underneath them. Thank you all for coming, I said, standing at the head of the long mahogany table. I wanted us to have a real conversation about our family situation. If this is about money, Dad interrupted, tone clipped. We don't expect you to fix anything. We know you're doing your best with limited means. I smiled slightly. Actually, I want to show you something. I picked up the remote and activated the wall display. The screen lit up with the first slide. Apex Moda Group, corporate structure, 17 fashion brands, 43 retail locations across North America and Europe, manufacturing across 4 continents. This is my company, I said. Silence. Bianca leaned in, eyes scanning familiar brand names she'd once bragged about. Nathan blinked. This looks like a multi-billion-dollar company. That's because it is. Current valuation, $2,800,000,000. 0 cents. I clicked to the next slide. 5-year revenue growth, profit margins, global expansion. The downtown boutique, that was my first space. I still work there to stay grounded. Bianca's voice cracked. You own Lumiere Fashion House? Among others, 16 more. And no, I didn't terminate your contract. Miranda Santos was terminated. The agency never knew Victoria Santos was the owner. Dad stared at the data, awe softening his usual distance. Why didn't you say anything? Because you never asked. You assumed I was just the quiet failure. I clicked again. Their financials. Dad's collapsing business, Nathan's legal issues, Bianca's debt. I could have helped with a single call, I said. But none of you thought I could. Bianca whispered. That dress I mocked? At Mom's funeral. It was from my newest collection, hand-woven silk, $12,000, 0 cents, if it were ever released. She covered her face. I said it looked cheap. You judge what you thought you saw. Nathan, still scrolling his phone, looked up. Delilah! Forbes called you the invisible titan. They put me on the cover 6 months ago, I replied. None of you mentioned it. Dad shifted uncomfortably. We don't really read Forbes. I clicked to the final slide, our photo from Mom's funeral. Everyone distracted, disconnected. She knew, I said. She always asked about my work. She never laughed when I called it a fashion empire. The room grew heavy with realization. What happens now? Dad asked. I can help financially, I said, but I won't go back to being dismissed. Bianca wiped her eyes. I don't know how to apologize. You start by seeing me for who I really am. And so we talked, 2 hours of unpacking hurt and truth, painful but honest. I offered Dad a consulting role. Nathan would help with international finance. Bianca, with her consumer insight, could lead campaigns. On condition, the boutique stays as it is. I'll still work there. It keeps me connected. 4 months later, we reunited, this time for the IPO. In that same Meridian Tower conference room, Dad was thriving. Nathan was promoted. Bianca was now the face of our brands, authentic and finally real. As I stood at the podium to ring the opening bell, I thought of Mom. Not because of the success, but because she always saw us clearly. Apex Moda Group opened at $47, 0 cents, and closed at $62, 0 cents, valuing it at over $4 billion, 0 cents. But the real victory? That happened months earlier when I chose truth and they finally chose to see me. If you've ever been underestimated, overlooked, or boxed in by someone else's expectations, then you know how much strength it takes to stay silent and succeed. I didn't reveal my truth to hurt them. I revealed it to free myself. If my story resonated with you, drop a comment. Tell me how you rose above doubt or how you're building your own version of success. And if you're still in the quiet phase of your journey, keep going. You don't owe the world an explanation, just results. Hit subscribe so we can keep walking this road together. Quiet power, loud legacy.